When humanity announced they would attend the Galactic Peace Summit without their military representatives, the alien delegates called it weakness. When human diplomats smiled and agreed to every territorial concession without consulting their generals, it was labeled as surrender. When Earth's most decorated war heroes were conspicuously absent from the negotiation tables that would determine the fate of human space, the galaxy's oldest civilizations whispered of humanity's inevitable subjugation. But in the depths of space, where ancient stars died in silence and new worlds were born in cosmic fire, something else was happening. Something the galaxy's most sophisticated intelligence networks had failed to detect. Something that would make the greatest military minds of 1,000 worlds wake in cold terror, realizing they had fundamentally misunderstood what it meant to negotiate with humans. The truth was simple, elegant, and absolutely terrifying. Earth hadn't left their troops out of the peace talks because they were weak. They had left them out because they were already exactly where they needed to be. And the galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived when so many others had fallen, why they had thrived in a universe that devoured the unprepared, and why their greatest strength had never been their weapons, their ships, or their courage, but their capacity to think 10 steps ahead of everyone else. The peace talks were about to begin. But the war? The war was already over. The aliens just didn't know it yet. Ambassador Sarah Chen stepped off the transport shuttle onto the pristine metallic surface of Nexus Station, the galaxy's most neutral ground and the chosen venue for what historians would later call the most important peace negotiations in galactic history. The artificial gravity hummed beneath her feet as she straightened her simple black diplomatic suit, a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial armor and flowing robes worn by the alien delegates already gathered in the distance. Behind her, the small human delegation followed, 12 individuals total, all civilians, all diplomats, all seemingly unprepared for the monumental task ahead. No generals, no admirals, no military advisors of any kind. The absence was so glaring that several alien observers had already begun transmitting reports back to their homeworlds, describing it as either the height of human arrogance or the depth of human desperation. They were wrong on both counts. Chen walked with measured steps through the station's central corridor, her eyes taking in details that her diplomatic training had taught her to notice. The Zephyrian delegation occupied the eastern wing, their crystalline forms reflecting the station's ambient lighting in patterns that spoke of barely contained aggression. The hegemony representatives had claimed the western section, their massive insectoid bodies requiring specially reinforced furniture and wider doorways. The ethereal collective's energy-based lifeforms flickered in their containment suits near the northern hub, while the machine intelligences of the synthetic concordat hummed with electronic conversation in the southern quarter. Each delegation had arrived with military escorts, tactical advisors, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Each had made a point of displaying their strength, their readiness for war, their unwillingness to accept anything less than total victory in the negotiations to come. Each was playing exactly the game that humanity wanted them to play. Ambassador Chen, a synthesized voice called out as she approached the central meeting hall. She turned to see Designate Prime 7743 of the synthetic concordat approaching, its mechanical form gliding silently across the polished floor. I must express my curiosity regarding your delegation's composition, or perhaps I should say, its incompleteness. Chen smiled, an expression that had been carefully practiced to convey just the right amount of diplomatic humility mixed with quiet confidence. I appreciate your concern, Designate Prime. However, I assure you that our delegation is precisely as complete as it needs to be. The machine intelligence's optical sensors focused on her with increased intensity. You arrive at negotiations that will determine the future of human space without a single military representative. Your species faces territorial concessions that could reduce your effective sphere of influence by 73%, and yet you bring only diplomats. Only diplomats, Chen agreed pleasantly. After all, this is a peace summit. What use would we have for warriors here? Designate Prime 7743 processed this response for 0.7 seconds before responding. An interesting perspective. I shall be curious to observe how your peaceful approach fares against the demands of those who come prepared for less diplomatic solutions. As if summoned by the mention of less diplomatic solutions, the sound of heavy footsteps announced the approach of War Commander Tax of the hegemony. The massive insectoid's chitinous armor gleamed with battle honors, and the pheromone trails he left behind spoke of victories in a dozen conflicts. His compound eyes fixed on Chen with the cold appraisal of a predator sizing up prey. The human representative, Tax clicked in the universal translator's interpretation of his native language. I had expected someone larger, more impressive, perhaps someone who has at least seen a battlefield. Chen inclined her head respectfully. War Commander Tax, your reputation precedes you. 17 successful campaigns, if I'm not mistaken. Quite impressive. 18. Tax corrected with obvious pride, and each one a complete victory. Perhaps this is something you should consider as we begin these talks, little human. Your species has fought bravely, but bravery alone does not win wars. How true, Chen agreed. Bravery alone is never sufficient. It requires intelligence, preparation, and most importantly, understanding one's true position on the battlefield. Something in her tone made Tax's antennae twitch with uncertainty, but before he could respond, the melodious tones of the ethereal collective's representative filled the air around them. Voice of the Wind materialized in her containment suit, the energy patterns within shifting to colors that the translation matrix interpreted as formal greeting mixed with subtle mockery. How fascinating to witness this exchange, Voice of the Wind sang. The young species attempting to project confidence while standing on the precipice of extinction. Tell me, Ambassador Chen, do you truly believe that your diplomatic skills will be sufficient to preserve human independence when the time comes to discuss terms? Chen's smile never wavered. I believe that we are all here because we recognize the value of a negotiated solution over continued conflict. Surely beings as enlightened as yourselves understand that sometimes the most elegant victories are won not through force, but through understanding. Understanding, repeated the crystalline voice of Shard Singer Korath as the Zephyrian delegate joined their growing circle. The translucent being's form shifted colors rapidly, indicating either excitement or agitation. An interesting choice of words. We understand quite well, human. We understand that your fleets are scattered, your defenses weakened by 3 years of constant warfare. We understand that your production capacity has been stretched beyond sustainability. We understand that you face a choice between negotiated surrender and complete annihilation. And yet, Chen replied calmly, here I stand, ready to negotiate. Not surrender, War Commander Korath. Negotiate. The alien delegates exchanged looks that needed no translation. The human was either completely deluded about her species' position, or she was operating under information they didn't possess. Given humanity's reputation for cunning, several of them began to wonder which possibility was more likely. The next several hours passed in formal presentations as each delegation outlined their opening positions. The hegemony demanded complete withdrawal from 17 star systems and the dismantling of all human military installations within 50 parsecs of their borders. The Zephyrian Collective insisted on mining rights to every asteroid belt in human space and exclusive passage rights through 6 major hyperspace lanes. The Ethereal Collective claimed sovereignty over all gas giants in human territory, while the Synthetic Concordat demanded access to every human research facility and database. When it came time for the human delegation to present their position, Chen rose from her seat and activated the central holographic display. Instead of star charts showing territorial concessions or lists of military assets to be surrendered, the display showed a simple image. Earth, blue and green and beautiful, rotating slowly in the simulated light of its sun. Honored delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Humanity's position is quite simple. We propose a comprehensive peace based on the principle of mutual benefit and respect for sovereign boundaries. We suggest a return to pre-war borders, the establishment of neutral trade zones, and the creation of joint scientific ventures that will benefit all our species. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Tax began to laugh, a sound like grinding metal that made several humans in the gallery wince. You jest, surely. Your species is beaten, human. Your fleets are broken. Your world's vulnerable. You are in no position to demand anything, let alone a return to previous boundaries. I'm not demanding anything, Chen replied serenely. I'm offering a solution that serves everyone's interests. After all, prolonged conflict is expensive for all parties involved. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline form flashed through several colors before settling on deep red. Expensive? Human, your species will pay whatever price is demanded. You have no choice in the matter. Choice is an interesting concept, Chen mused, as if they were discussing abstract philosophy rather than the fate of billions of human lives. I wonder, though, if you've all considered the costs of what you're proposing. The hegemony, for instance, would need to maintain occupation forces in 17 systems indefinitely. That's quite a drain on resources, isn't it, War Commander Fax? Tax's mandibles clicked dismissively. A temporary inconvenience. Temporary. Chen tilted her head slightly. History suggests otherwise. Occupation duties tend to stretch on much longer than anticipated, and the Zephyrian mining operations would require massive security forces to protect them from, shall we say, local resistance movements. That's quite expensive to maintain over decades. You speak of costs as if your opinion matters. Voice of the Wind sang mockingly. What costs could possibly concern us when weighed against the benefits of victory? Chen nodded thoughtfully. A fair point. But I wonder if you've calculated all the costs involved. For instance, have you considered the expense of replacing the infrastructure that would need to be destroyed in the final assault on human space? Or the loss of potential trade revenue from the complete elimination of human economic activity? Or perhaps most significantly, the cost of explaining to your respective populations why this victory required such extensive sacrifices? Something in her tone made Designate Prime 7743's optical sensors focus more intently. Explain your meaning, Ambassador. Chen's smile broadened slightly. Oh, I think you understand perfectly. Designate Prime. After all, your intelligence networks are quite sophisticated. I'm sure you've all run the calculations on what total victory would actually cost your respective civilizations. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words settled in. Each delegate began to review the intelligence reports they'd received, the casualty projections, the economic analyses. The truth was uncomfortable. Completely defeating humanity would indeed be expensive, more expensive than many of them had publicly admitted. But there was something else in Chen's tone, something that suggested she knew more than she was saying, something that made War Commander Tax lean forward slightly, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights as he studied the human ambassador more carefully. You speak as if you have alternatives to offer, Tax said slowly, as if your position is stronger than it appears. Appearances can be deceiving, Chen agreed. For instance, it might appear that humanity sent only diplomats to these talks because we have no military options left. Or it might appear that way because we have no need for military representation here. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline form shifted to deep purple, a color that typically indicated either confusion or concern. No need for military representation? Explain yourself, human. Chen walked to the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that somehow managed to convey both respect and quiet authority. Tell me, honored delegates, when was the last time any of your intelligence services received a communication from our fleets? Designate Prime 7743 processed the question with characteristic machine efficiency. Human fleet communications have been silent for 72 hours, 14 minutes, and 37 seconds. This is consistent with either communications blackout or... The machine intelligence's voice trailed off as the implications began to cascade through its processing systems. Communications blackout could indeed indicate damaged equipment or desperation, but it could also indicate something else entirely. Or, Chen prompted gently, or radio silence maintained by units already in position. Voice of the Wind sang, her energy pattern shifting to colors that indicated dawning alarm. Chen's smile became radiant. How perceptive of you. Yes, radio silence is indeed maintained by units already in position. The question is, in position for what? War! Commander Tax rose from his seat, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. You imply that human forces are prepared for some action? Impossible. Our intelligence clearly shows. Your intelligence shows exactly what we wanted it to show. Chen interrupted politely. For instance, did you know that 17 of your monitoring stations have been observing carefully constructed holographic projections for the past 6 weeks? Or that the damaged human vessels your scouts reported were actually unmanned decoys broadcasting recorded distress signals? The alien delegates exchanged glances that radiated increasing alarm. If the human was telling the truth, if their intelligence had been compromised to that extent, then everything they thought they knew about human fleet positions, strength, and capabilities was potentially false. Impossible. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline voice rang with harmonics of denial. Our monitoring systems are too sophisticated for such deception. Are they? Chen asked mildly. Forgive me, but I believe your monitoring systems are designed to detect physical objects and energy signatures, are they not? They're quite excellent at identifying ships, weapons, and conventional military assets. But they have certain limitations when it comes to detecting things that aren't there. or things that are there but don't look like what they actually are. Designate Prime 7743's optical sensors began cycling rapidly through different spectrums. You claim your forces have achieved effective invisibility? Not invisibility, Chen corrected. Misdirection. We've simply been where you weren't looking, doing things you weren't expecting, preparing for scenarios you hadn't considered. The chamber's atmosphere grew thick with tension as each delegate began to reconsider their intelligence reports, their tactical assessments, their certainty about human capabilities and positions. If even half of what the human ambassador suggested was true, then the balance of power was not what it appeared to be. War Commander Thax's mandibles clicked in a pattern that indicated deep thought mixed with growing concern. Even if your claims are accurate, human, you still face the combined might of 4 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. No amount of misdirection can overcome such odds. 4 civilizations, Chen mused. Yes, that's quite impressive. Tell me, War Commander, how well do your 4 civilizations coordinate their military operations? How smoothly do hegemony tactics integrate with Zephyrian strategies? How effectively do ethereal energy weapons support synthetic concordat mechanical forces? The question hung in the air like an accusation. The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. The 4-species alliance was exactly that. An alliance. Not a unified command structure, not an integrated military force, but 4 separate powers with different doctrines, different capabilities, and different objectives, united only by their shared desire to see humanity defeated. Coordination has been adequate, Tax admitted grudgingly. Adequate for what you've faced so far, Chen agreed. But adequate for what's coming. Voice of the Wind's energy patterns shifted rapidly through the spectrum. What is coming, human? Speak plainly. Chen returned to the central holographic display and made a subtle gesture. The image of Earth faded, replaced by a 3-dimensional representation of local galactic space. Stars, trade routes, military installations, and fleet positions were marked in various colors, but as the delegates studied the display, they began to notice something disturbing. The human fleet positions shown on the display didn't match their intelligence reports, not even close. This is our actual current deployment, Chen said conversationally. As you can see, it differs somewhat from what your intelligence services have been reporting. Where alien intelligence showed scattered, weakened human forces barely holding defensive positions, the display revealed fleets positioned at key strategic points, not defending but ready to strike. Where reports indicated damaged infrastructure and depleted resources, the reality showed hidden bases, concealed supply lines, and production facilities that had never appeared on any alien scanner. Designate Prime 7743's mechanical voice carried harmonics of what might have been shock. If this data is accurate, human forces are not retreating. They are positioning. Positioning for what? Shard Singer Korath demanded, her crystalline form flashing through colors too rapidly to interpret. Chen's smile became almost predatory. For the end of this war, of course. You see, honored delegates, while your fleets have been chasing phantoms and your intelligence services have been feeding on carefully prepared misinformation, human forces have been doing what they do best, which is adapting, learning, preparing. Chen gestured at the display again. We've spent 3 years studying your tactics, your capabilities, your weaknesses. We've identified every critical infrastructure node in your territories, every supply line bottleneck, every command and control vulnerability. War, Commander Thax's compound eyes focused with laser intensity on the human ambassador. You threaten us? Not at all, Chen replied calmly. I'm offering you a choice. You can accept our peace terms, a return to pre-war borders with some minor adjustments for mutual benefit, or you can discover what happens when humanity stops playing defense and starts playing to win. The implication was clear, and it sent cold calculation racing through every alien mind in the chamber. If the human data was accurate, if their forces were actually positioned as shown, if their intelligence networks had been compromised as thoroughly as suggested, then the balance of power was not what any of them had believed. Voice of the Wind's containment suit flickered as her energy patterns shifted to colors indicating urgent communication. You claim the capability to threaten our core worlds. I claim the capability to end this war decisively, Chen corrected. Whether that requires threatening your core worlds depends entirely on the choices you make in the next few hours. The chamber fell into absolute silence as each delegate processed the implications. They had come to these talks expecting to dictate terms to a defeated enemy. Instead, They found themselves facing the possibility that the enemy was neither defeated nor in a position to be dictated to. Shard singer Korith's crystalline voice carried new harmonics when she spoke again. Assuming your claims have merit, human, what exactly are you proposing? Chen returned to her seat and activated a new holographic display. This one showed trade agreements, scientific exchanges, territorial boundaries, and mutual defense pacts. Peace honored delegates. Real peace, not just the absence of war. A framework for cooperation that benefits everyone involved. And if we refuse? War Commander Tax asked bluntly. Chen's expression became almost regretful. Then I'm afraid you'll discover that humanity's reputation for stubborn survival isn't just propaganda. We've survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, and 2 world wars on our homeworld alone. We've survived first contact with hostile aliens, 3 separate invasion attempts, and the loss of our first colony worlds. She paused, letting the weight of human history settle in the chamber. We've survived because we're very good at doing whatever it takes to ensure our continued existence. And right now, what it takes is giving you a choice between peace and the discovery of just how far we're willing to go to protect our future. The silence stretched for long minutes as each delegate considered their options. The human's confidence suggested she wasn't bluffing, but the implications of accepting her claims were staggering.
If humanity was actually in a position of strength rather than weakness, then everything about this conflict needed to be reconsidered.
Finally, Designate Prime 7743 spoke, its mechanical voice carrying unusual hesitation. We will need time to reassess our positions based on this new information. Of course, Chen agreed graciously. These talks are scheduled to continue for the next 72 hours. I'm sure that will be sufficient time for everyone to make their final determinations about what path serves their people's interests best. As the delegates began to file out of the chamber, each lost in their own urgent calculations, Chen remained seated, her expression serene. She had played the first hand of humanity's final gambit, and the reactions told her everything she needed to know. The aliens were beginning to understand that they might have made a critical miscalculation. The question now was whether they would be smart enough to take the exit she was offering them, or whether they would force humanity to demonstrate just how thoroughly they had been outmaneuvered. In either case, the war was about to end. The only question was whether it would end with negotiated peace or with the galaxy learning why humans had never been conquered by anything the universe had thrown at them. The next 72 hours would provide the answer. The emergency session convened in the Zephyrian delegation's private chamber 3 hours after the initial talks had adjourned. The crystalline walls reflected and refracted light in patterns that would have been beautiful under other circumstances, that the 4 alien leaders gathered around the central table were focused on far more pressing concerns than aesthetic appreciation. War Commander Tax paced the perimeter of the room, his heavy footsteps creating rhythmic vibrations that the other delegates could feel through the station's superstructure. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's prismatic lighting as he processed the implications of Ambassador Chen's revelations. The human's confidence had been unsettling enough, but her specific knowledge of alien monitoring systems and intelligence capabilities suggested something far more troubling than simple diplomatic posturing. The human spoke with too much certainty. Tax clicked, his mandibles expressing frustration in a way that needed no translation. Either she is the most accomplished liar I have encountered in 18 campaigns, or our intelligence assessments have been fundamentally flawed. Shard Singer Korith's crystalline form shifted through a spectrum of colors that indicated deep contemplation mixed with growing alarm. Our monitoring stations have reported consistent data for months. Human fleet movements, defensive positions, resource allocation, all of it has been carefully tracked and verified through multiple independent sources. That is precisely what concerns me, sang Voice of the Wind, her energy patterns flickering with unusual intensity within her containment suit. Multiple independent sources reporting identical information suggests either unprecedented accuracy or sophisticated coordination of deceptive data. Designate Prime 7743 had been running continuous calculations since leaving the main chamber, and the results were disturbing in their implications. I have conducted a comprehensive analysis of reported human fleet positions over the past 96 days. The patterns suggest either remarkable strategic incompetence on the part of human commanders or deliberate manipulation designed to create false impressions. Strategic incompetence? Tax nodded. Humans may be primitive by our standards, but their military leadership has demonstrated considerable tactical acumen throughout this conflict. They do not simply blunder into predictable positions. The war commander's assessment was accurate and troubling in equal measure. Humanity had emerged as a spacefaring civilization only recently by galactic standards, but their rapid adaptation to interstellar warfare had surprised even their enemies. They learned quickly, improvised effectively, and had shown a disturbing tendency to turn apparent weaknesses into unexpected advantages. Voice of the Wind's containment suit brightened as her energy patterns shifted to colors indicating urgent communication. We must consider the possibility that Ambassador Chen spoke truthfully about the sophistication of human deception operations. If our monitoring systems have been compromised to the extent she suggested, then our understanding of current strategic realities may be dangerously inaccurate. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline voice carried harmonics of reluctant agreement. The question becomes, how do we verify the truth without revealing our own uncertainty to the humans? Any attempt to independently confirm their actual fleet positions could be interpreted as aggressive reconnaissance. Or it could trigger whatever response they have prepared, Tax added grimly. If the human ambassador was truthful about their positioning and readiness, then active scanning of their territories could be seen as a preliminary to attack. The implications were sobering. Each of the four civilizations had committed significant resources to this war, confident that humanity's defeat was inevitable given sufficient pressure. The possibility that those resources had been wasted chasing illusions while human forces prepared for a decisive counterstrike was not something any of them wanted to report to their respective leadership. Designate Prime 7743's optical sensors cycled through multiple spectrums as it processed tactical scenarios. There is another consideration we have not adequately addressed. The human delegation's composition itself may be significant beyond what we initially assessed. How do you mean? Voice of the Wind asked. Consider the strategic implications of sending only diplomatic personnel to negotiations of this magnitude. Either humanity is genuinely incapable of fielding military representation due to catastrophic losses, or they are supremely confident that military representation is unnecessary. The silence that followed was heavy with uncomfortable realization. If humanity was supremely confident, if they truly believed that military representation was unnecessary at what should be surrender negotiations, then the strategic situation was far different from what any of the alien powers had believed. Thack stopped pacing and turned to face the others, his massive frame casting shifting shadows across the crystalline walls. I have fought 17 campaigns against 12 different species. In every case, the defeated enemy sent military representatives to negotiate surrender terms. They wanted their commanders present to ensure that their forces were treated with appropriate respect, that surrender conditions were militarily feasible, that transition arrangements could be properly coordinated. And humanity sent none of this, Korath observed, her colors shifting to deeper hues of concern. None, Tax confirmed. Either they have no military leadership left to send or they don't consider this a surrender negotiation. Voice of the Wind finished, her energy patterns flickering with the implications. The possibility hung in the air like a weapon waiting to discharge. Each delegate began reviewing their understanding of human psychology, human military doctrine, human strategic thinking. The uncomfortable truth was that humans had a documented history of turning apparent defeats into unexpected victories through methods that other species found difficult to predict or counter. Designate Prime 7743 activated its internal communication systems and began transmitting priority requests to synthetic concordat intelligence networks. I am initiating immediate verification protocols for all human fleet position data from the past 30 days. Cross-referencing multiple sensor networks, comparing energy signatures, analyzing communication patterns. How long for results? Shard Singer Korath asked, her crystalline form reflecting the machine intelligence's optical emissions. Preliminary analysis should be complete within 6 hours. Comprehensive verification will require 18 to 24 hours, assuming cooperation from all intelligence networks. Tax resumed his pacing, but now his movements carried the deliberate rhythm of a predator planning an approach. 6 hours may be too long. If the humans are positioned as advantageously as their ambassador suggested, then every hour we delay gives them additional time to refine whatever strategy they have prepared. What do you propose? Voice of the Wind sang, though her energy patterns indicated she already suspected the answer. Direct verification, reconnaissance in force. Deploy sufficient assets to confirm or deny human fleet positions without triggering full-scale resumption of hostilities. The suggestion was logical but dangerous. Reconnaissance in force meant moving significant military assets into positions where they could observe human territories and confirm actual fleet deployments. It would provide the verification they needed, but it would also signal to humanity that their claims were being taken seriously enough to warrant investigation. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline form shifted through rapid color changes, indicating internal debate. Such action carries significant risk. If the humans are indeed positioned as they claim, then reconnaissance in force could be interpreted as the beginning of renewed hostilities. And if we do nothing, we may find ourselves negotiating from a position of weakness rather than strength, Tax countered. I will not report to the Hegemony Council that we accepted human surrender terms without verifying their actual capability to resist. Designate Prime 7743 completed its initial communication protocols and refocused on the discussion. There may be an alternative approach. Rather than deploying reconnaissance assets that could be detected and interpreted as hostile, we could analyze the human's own communications and behavior patterns for verification. Explain, Voice of the Wind requested. If Ambassador Chen was engaging in sophisticated deception, then her presentation should contain inconsistencies or telltale signs of fabrication under detailed analysis. If she was truthful, then her confidence and specific knowledge should be verifiable through indirect means. The machine intelligence began projecting holographic displays showing speech pattern analysis, micro-expression evaluation, and physiological stress indicators from Ambassador Chen's presentation. The results were not comforting for the alien delegates. Human stress indicators remained within normal diplomatic ranges throughout her presentation. Designate Prime 7743 reported. Voice pattern analysis shows no signs of deceptive speech patterns. Microexpressions are consistent with controlled confidence rather than anxious bluffing. Fax studied the analysis with the practiced eye of a military commander who had interrogated countless prisoners and defectors. She believes what she's saying. Either the humans have achieved unprecedented success in training their diplomats to lie convincingly, or Ambassador Chen genuinely believes her species holds a position of strength. Which brings us back to the fundamental question. Korath sang with harmonics of frustration. Is human confidence justified by reality, or have they succeeded in deceiving themselves as well as us? The question was interrupted by an urgent communication alert from Designate Prime 7743's external sensors. The machine intelligence processed the incoming data for several seconds before announcing its contents to the group. Priority message from Synthetic Concordat Fleet Command. Long-range sensors have detected unusual energy signatures in the Kepler 442 system, previously believed to be uninhabited human territory. All four delegates focused intently on this development. Kepler A442 was deep within human space, far from the front lines of the conflict, and had shown no signs of significant activity for months. Any unusual energy signatures in that system could indicate either human industrial activity that had somehow escaped detection, or worse, military assets positioned where they shouldn't exist, according to all intelligence assessments.
Nature of the energy signatures? Voice of the Wind asked, her containment suit flickering with increased intensity.
Preliminary analysis suggests large-scale industrial operations. Metalworking, energy refining, possibly manufacturing. The signatures are consistent with major military production facilities operating at full capacity. The implications were staggering. If humans had maintained or constructed major manufacturing capabilities in systems believed to be abandoned or lightly defended, then their resource situation was far better than alien intelligence had assessed. More troubling still, the location of such facilities suggested long-term strategic planning rather than desperate improvisation. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline form flashed through colors indicating alarm and reassessment. How many other uninhabited human systems might contain similar surprises? How much of our intelligence picture has been fundamentally inaccurate? Unknown. Designate Prime 7743. Admitted. Full sensor sweeps of human territory would require massive resource commitment and would certainly be detected by human monitoring systems. Such action would likely be interpreted as preparation for renewed hostilities. Tax had stopped pacing and was now standing perfectly still, a behavior that in hegemony culture indicated intense focus and decision-making. We are approaching a critical decision point. We can continue these negotiations based on our existing intelligence assessments, knowing that they may be fundamentally flawed. Or we can take action to verify the true situation, knowing that such action may trigger whatever response the humans have prepared. There is a third option, Voice of the Wind sang quietly. We can accept Ambassador Chen's peace terms as presented. The silence that followed was profound. Accepting human peace terms would mean acknowledging that the war had not proceeded as planned, that victory was not as certain as had been believed, that the balance of power might not favor the alien alliance as decisively as hoped.
Unacceptable. Tax clicked firmly.
The hegemony has invested too much in this conflict to withdraw based on unverified human claims. Our fleets, our resources, our standing among the galactic community, all demand that we verify the truth before making any final decisions. Designate Prime 7743's optical sensors brightened as new data streams became available. Additional information is becoming available from multiple intelligence sources. Cross-referencing all reports from the past 72 hours shows a pattern of communication silence from human military assets that is unusual.
Unusual how? Korath asked.
Human military communications typically maintain regular schedules even during combat operations. Supply requests, status reports, tactical coordination all generate predictable communication patterns. For the past 72 hours, these patterns have been almost entirely absent. Voice of the Wind's energy patterns shifted rapidly through the spectrum. Communications blackout could indicate several possibilities. Equipment failure due to battle damage. Deliberate silence to avoid detection during retreat. Or radio silence, maintained by units already in position for planned operations. Tax finished grimly. The machine intelligence continued its analysis, processing vast amounts of data with mechanical precision. There is another anomaly worth noting. Several of our monitoring stations have reported intermittent sensor ghosts over the past 36 hours. Brief contacts that appear to be ships or installations but fade before clear identification can be achieved. Sensor malfunctions? Korath suggested hopefully. Negative. The ghosts appear across multiple sensor types and at various locations throughout human space. The pattern suggests either widespread equipment failure across all monitoring systems, which is statistically improbable, or systematic interference designed to create uncertainty about actual positions and movements. The weight of evidence was beginning to accumulate in disturbing patterns. Individual anomalies might be explained by equipment failure, human desperation, or simple coincidence. But the combination of communication blackouts, sensor ghosts, unexpected industrial activity, and Ambassador Chen's confident presentation painted a picture that none of the alien delegates wanted to accept. Tax resumed his pacing, but now his movements carried the urgency of a commander realizing that his tactical assumptions might be fundamentally flawed. How much time do we have before we must provide responses to the human proposals? Ambassador Chen indicated that talks would continue for 72 hours total. Voice of the Wind replied, "We have approximately 65 hours remaining. 65 hours to determine whether we are negotiating with a defeated enemy or walking into a carefully prepared trap. Designate Prime 7743 observed with mechanical precision." The Stark assessment crystallized the situation facing all four delegations. They had arrived at Nexus Station confident in their intelligence, certain of their position, prepared to dictate terms to a beaten enemy. Now they faced the possibility that everything they thought they knew was wrong, that the enemy was neither beaten nor in any position to be dictated to. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline form pulsed with colors indicating deep consideration. Perhaps we are overthinking the situation. Human confidence could be nothing more than desperate bravado. Their ambassador could be engaging in sophisticated deception designed to convince us that weakness is actually strength. Possibly, Tax agreed. But what if she isn't? What if human forces are actually positioned as she claimed? What if our intelligence has been compromised as thoroughly as she suggested? Can we afford to gamble our civilization's futures on the assumption that she's bluffing? The question hung in the air with the weight of billions of lives and the fate of entire star systems. Each delegate understood that the decisions made in the next 65 hours would determine not only the outcome of this war, but the balance of power in this entire sector of the galaxy for generations to come. Voice of the Wind's containment suit flickered as her energy pattern shifted to colors indicating urgent decision-making. I propose a compromise approach. We continue negotiations while simultaneously conducting discrete verification of human claims. If verification confirms their weakness, we proceed with original victory conditions. If verification suggests their strength is real, we seriously consider their peace terms. Discrete verification may not be possible. Designate Prime 7743 warned. Any significant intelligence gathering effort will likely be detected by human monitoring systems. Detection could trigger whatever response they have prepared. Then we face the fundamental choice that has been before us since Ambassador Chen made her presentation, Tax observed. Do we trust our existing intelligence and demand total victory, or do we acknowledge the possibility that our intelligence is flawed and negotiate accordingly? The four alien leaders stared at each other across the crystalline chamber. each understanding that they stood at a crossroads that would define the future of interstellar relations in this region of the galaxy. The humans had played their opening move with skill and confidence, but the game was far from over. The next 65 hours would determine whether humanity's gambit would succeed, or whether four of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations would call their bluff and discover the truth about human capabilities. In either case, the galaxy would never be the same. The central negotiation chamber on Nexus Station had never felt smaller to the assembled delegates. 48 hours had passed since Ambassador Chen's initial presentation, and the weight of accumulated intelligence, failed verification attempts, and growing uncertainty pressed down on the room like a physical force. The holographic displays that had once shown confident tactical assessments now flickered with question marks and probability ranges that no military commander wanted to accept. War Commander Tax entered the chamber with the deliberate stride of someone who had made difficult decisions and was prepared to live with their consequences. His compound eyes swept the room, taking note of the subtle changes in posture and positioning that spoke volumes about the psychological state of each delegation. The humans sat with the same calm confidence they had displayed from the beginning, but now that confidence seemed less like diplomatic posturing and more like genuine certainty. Shard Singer Korath materialized her crystalline form near the Zephyrian delegation's assigned seating, her translucent structure reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that betrayed internal turmoil. The colors shifting through her form spoke of conflicted emotions and difficult calculations, the visual manifestation of a civilization grappling with the possibility that its fundamental assumptions had been wrong. Voice of the Wind flickered within her containment suit as she took her position with the ethereal collective's representatives. Her energy patterns moved through spectrums that indicated deep contemplation mixed with what human observers might have recognized as anxiety. The collective consciousness she represented had spent the past 2 days processing vast amounts of contradictory information, trying to reconcile their intelligence reports with their complete inability to verify human military positions. Designate Prime 70743 glided into position with mechanical precision, but the machine intelligence's optical sensors carried an unusual intensity that suggested maximum processing power devoted to ongoing analysis. For 48 hours, the synthetic concordat's most sophisticated artificial minds had worked continuously to solve the puzzle of human capabilities, and their failure to reach definitive conclusions was itself a significant data point. Ambassador Chen rose from her seat as the session was called to order, her expression serene as she surveyed the assembled delegates. The past 2 days had unfolded exactly as human planners had anticipated, with each alien civilization struggling to reconcile their preconceptions with increasingly disturbing evidence that those preconceptions might be wrong. Honored delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had characterized her initial presentation. I trust you have had sufficient time to consider the proposals we discussed at our last meeting. Have your respective governments reached any preliminary conclusions about the path forward? Each alien delegate understood that this moment represented a critical decision point, not just for this war, but for the future balance of power in this entire sector of the galaxy. The choice they made in the next few minutes would echo through history, determining whether this conflict ended in negotiated peace or escalated into something far more devastating. War Commander Thax was the first to break the silence, his mechanical voice carrying the weight of military experience and hard-earned wisdom. Ambassador Chen, the hegemony has conducted extensive verification of our intelligence assessments regarding human military capabilities and positions. And what did that verification reveal? Chen asked with genuine curiosity, though she obviously already knew the answer. It revealed that our intelligence may have been incomplete. Tax's admission carried the bitter taste of a professional soldier acknowledging tactical failure. Our most sophisticated monitoring systems were unable to confirm the positions and capabilities your presentation suggested, but they were equally unable to refute them. Chen nodded with understanding. Intelligence gathering is always challenging in wartime. Both sides naturally attempt to conceal their true capabilities from their enemies. I'm sure you can appreciate the strategic value of maintaining uncertainty about one's actual strength. Shardsinger Korath's crystalline form shifted through colors that indicated grudging respect, mixed with frustration. Your species has demonstrated considerable skill in information warfare, Ambassador. The question that concerns us is whether that skill extends to actual military capabilities, or whether we are witnessing an elaborate deception designed to convince us that weakness is actually strength. An understandable concern, Chen replied diplomatically. After all, deception is a recognized element of warfare, and certainly humans have employed it when circumstances required. The question you must answer is whether you can afford to gamble your civilization's futures on the assumption that we're bluffing.
Voice of the Wind's energy patterns flickered rapidly as she spoke, her translated words carrying harmonics of deep uncertainty.
The Ethereal Collective has reviewed all available data regarding human capabilities and strategic positioning. Our analysis suggests 3 possible explanations for the current situation. Please, share your conclusions, Chen invited graciously. First possibility. Human military forces have been so thoroughly defeated that deception is your only remaining option, and this entire negotiation represents a desperate attempt to secure better surrender terms through psychological manipulation.
Chen's expression remained neutral, neither confirming nor denying the possibility.
Second possibility. Human intelligence capabilities are far more sophisticated than we previously assessed, and your forces are actually positioned as advantageously as you claim, making continued warfare inadvisable for all parties involved. And the third possibility? Chen prompted. Voice of the Wind's containment suit brightened as her energy patterns shifted to colors that indicated profound uncertainty. Third possibility. The truth lies somewhere between these extremes, and the actual balance of power is sufficiently ambiguous that the outcome of continued warfare cannot be predicted with acceptable confidence. Chen smiled with what appeared to be genuine appreciation for the analysis. A remarkably thorough assessment. May I ask which possibility the Ethereal Collective considers most likely? That is precisely the problem. Voice of the Wind sang with harmonics that expressed frustration. Our collective intelligence cannot reach consensus on which explanation best fits the observed evidence. This uncertainty itself is unprecedented in our decision-making processes. Designate Prime 7743's optical sensors focused intently on the human ambassador as it contributed its own analysis. The synthetic concordat has reached similar conclusions. Mathematical modeling of human capabilities produces probability distributions with unacceptably large variance ranges. We cannot determine with sufficient confidence whether continued warfare serves our interests or threatens our existence. Chen leaned forward slightly, her posture suggesting sympathetic understanding. Uncertainty is uncomfortable for any decision-making process, artificial or organic. But perhaps that uncertainty itself provides valuable information about the strategic situation. Explain. Tax commanded bluntly. Consider what your uncertainty tells you about human capabilities, Chen suggested. If we were truly as weak as your original intelligence assessments indicated, would there be any uncertainty about the outcome of verification efforts? Would your most sophisticated sensors and analysis systems struggle to confirm our defeat? The question hit the alien delegates like a physical blow. She was right, and they all knew it. If human forces had been as thoroughly beaten as initial reports suggested, then verification should have been straightforward. The inability to confirm human weakness despite intensive efforts was itself evidence that human weakness might not exist. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline form flashed through rapid color changes indicating internal debate and reassessment. You suggest that our inability to verify human defeat is evidence that human defeat does not exist to be verified. I suggest that your uncertainty about our capabilities might be the most accurate intelligence assessment any of you have received in months. Chen replied calmly. War? Commander Tax rose from his seat, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber as he began to pace with the measured steps of a predator reconsidering its approach. Very well, Ambassador. Let us assume for the moment that human capabilities are indeed greater than our intelligence suggested. Let us assume that your confidence is justified by actual strength rather than desperate bluffing. What exactly are you proposing as terms for peace? Chen activated the central holographic display, replacing the previous star charts with a comprehensive proposal document. The terms were detailed, balanced, and notably generous considering humanity's supposed position of weakness. Mutual recognition of pre-war territorial boundaries with minor adjustments to eliminate strategic flashpoints. Establishment of neutral trading zones to facilitate economic cooperation. Joint scientific ventures to address challenges that affect all our species. Formal non-aggression pacts with graduated response protocols for future disputes. The alien delegates studied the proposed terms with growing amazement. These were not the desperate concessions of a defeated enemy, but the careful proposals of a power seeking stability and mutual benefit. The implications were staggering. Voice of the Wind's energy patterns shifted to colors that indicated profound recalculation. These terms assume equality of position between human and alien civilizations. They assume that humanity possesses sufficient strength to negotiate as an equal rather than a supplicant. They assume that continued warfare serves no one's interests. Chen corrected gently. They assume that intelligent species should be capable of finding solutions that benefit everyone involved, rather than pursuing zero-sum conflicts that damage all parties. Designate Prime 7743 processed the proposed terms with mechanical precision, while simultaneously running tactical simulations based on various assumptions about human capabilities. The results were consistent across all scenarios. If humans possessed even half the strength their ambassador suggested, these terms represented a remarkably generous offer. Ambassador Chen, the machine intelligence said slowly, these terms are considerably more favorable to alien interests than military victory would likely produce, assuming human capabilities match your claims. Why would humanity offer such generous terms from a position of strength? Chen's smile became radiant. Because strength that serves no constructive purpose is merely destruction waiting to happen. Because intelligent species should be capable of learning from conflict rather than simply perpetuating it. Because the universe is vast enough for all of us to prosper if we choose cooperation over competition. The chamber fell silent as each delegate processed the implications of her words. They had come to these negotiations expecting to divide the spoils of victory. Instead, they found themselves considering whether to accept terms that would preserve their dignity while acknowledging that victory might not be achievable at acceptable cost. Takken stopped pacing and turned to face Chen directly. And if we refuse these terms? If we choose to test human capabilities through resumed warfare rather than accept negotiated settlement? For the first time since the negotiations began, Chen's diplomatic mask slipped slightly, revealing something harder underneath. Then you will discover that humanity's capacity for survival is not a matter of diplomatic rhetoric, War Commander. You will learn what it means to fight a species that has survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and 2 global wars on their homeworld alone. She paused, letting the weight of human history settle in the chamber. You will discover that humans are very good at doing whatever is necessary to ensure their continued existence, and that our definition of necessary is considerably more flexible than you might prefer. The threat was delivered with diplomatic politeness, but its implications were unmistakable. If negotiations failed, if the alien alliance chose warfare over peace, then humanity was prepared to demonstrate capabilities that had been carefully concealed throughout the conflict. Shard Singer Korath's crystalline form shifted to deep colors that indicated fear mixed with grudging respect. You speak with great confidence for a species that faces overwhelming odds. I speak with the confidence of a species that has never accepted overwhelming odds as an excuse for surrender. Chen replied, we have survived everything the universe has thrown at us, including the attention of 4 advanced alien civilizations. We will continue to survive, regardless of the choices you make in this chamber. The silence stretched for long minutes as each delegate contemplated the decision before them. They could accept generous terms that acknowledged the possibility of human strength, or they could gamble everything on the assumption that human confidence was unjustified by reality. Finally, Designate Prime 7743 spoke for all of them. We will need time to consult with our respective governments before making final decisions of this magnitude. Of course, Chen agreed graciously. How much time do you require? The 4 alien delegates exchanged glances before Tarkax answered for the group. 12 hours should be sufficient to receive final authorization for whatever course of action we choose. Chen nodded acceptance. 12 hours, then. When we reconvene, I trust we will have reached conclusions that serve everyone's interests. As the delegates began to file out of the chamber, each lost in their own urgent calculations, Chen remained seated, her expression serene. She had played humanity's final card with skill and precision, and the reactions told her everything she needed to know. The aliens were beginning to understand that they faced a choice between negotiated peace with dignity intact, or the discovery of just how far humans were willing to go to protect their future. The next 12 hours would determine which path they chose. But regardless of their decision, the war was about to end. The only question was whether it would end with handshakes or with the galaxy learning why humans had never been conquered by anything the universe had thrown at them. The moment of truth was at hand. The war rooms of 4 different alien civilizations hummed with urgent activity as their greatest minds struggled with the most important decision in their species' histories. Across hundreds of light years in council chambers and command centers, through quantum communication networks and encrypted data streams, the leadership of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations grappled with a question that should have been simple but had become impossibly complex. On the Hegemony flagship Conquest of Worlds, War Commander Tax stood before the Supreme Military Council, his compound eyes reflecting the tactical displays that surrounded the chamber. The massive insectoid warriors who comprised the Hegemony's highest military authority, listened in silence as Tax delivered his assessment of the human negotiating position. "The humans claim strength we cannot verify," Tax reported, his voice carrying the weight of professional uncertainty that his subordinates had never heard before. "Our most sophisticated intelligence networks have been unable to confirm their weakness despite months of careful observation." Their ambassador speaks with confidence that suggests either masterful deception or genuine capability. Supreme Commander Zethk, whose battle honors stretch back over 3 decades of successful campaigns, leaned forward in his command throne. "Your recommendation, War Commander?" Tax had spent the past 10 hours reviewing every aspect of the human situation, consulting with intelligence specialists, tactical analysts and strategic planners. The conclusion he had reached was not one he wanted to deliver to the Supreme Military Council. "I recommend acceptance of human peace terms," Tax said firmly. "The risk of continued warfare may exceed acceptable parameters." The silence that followed was profound. The hegemony had not accepted negotiated peace from a position of anything other than overwhelming strength in over 200 years. The concept of treating humans as equals rather than conquered subjects required a fundamental shift in their military philosophy. Supreme Commander Zeth's mandibles clicked in patterns that indicated deep consideration. "Explain your reasoning, War Commander." "Intelligence assessment indicates 3 possible scenarios," Tax replied, activating holographic displays that showed his analysis. "First scenario. Humans are indeed as weak as originally assessed, but have achieved unprecedented success in concealing this weakness from our monitoring systems. Second scenario. Human capabilities are significantly greater than assessed, and continued warfare risks unacceptable casualties. Third scenario. Truth lies between these extremes, making outcome of continued conflict unpredictable." "And your evaluation of these scenarios?" Tax's compound eyes focused intently on the Supreme Commander. "First scenario requires assuming human deception capabilities exceed anything previously encountered in galactic warfare. Second scenario requires acknowledging intelligence failures of unprecedented magnitude. Third scenario requires accepting uncertainty and strategic planning. All 3 scenarios are unacceptable to hegemony doctrine," observed War Commander Rith, whose own battle record included the successful conquest of 7 worlds. "Yes," Tax agreed grimly, "which is precisely why I recommend accepting human terms. When all tactical assessments produce unacceptable conclusions, the wisest course is to avoid testing those conclusions in actual combat." Meanwhile, in the crystal matrices that served as the Zephyrian Collective's decision-making centers, Shard Singer Korath's consciousness merged with the collective intelligence of her species' leadership. The crystalline beings communicated through harmonic resonances that created complex patterns of shared thought and collaborative analysis. The human situation resonated through the collective consciousness like a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious composition. Every attempt to model human capabilities produced probability ranges too wide for comfort, uncertainty levels too high for confident decision-making. Prime Singer Athis, whose consciousness had guided Zephyrian strategic thinking for over a century, resonated with frequencies that indicated profound concern. "The humans have introduced variables into our calculations that resist resolution through conventional analysis. Their ambassador demonstrated knowledge of our monitoring capabilities that suggest systematic intelligence penetration." Korath contributed to the collective discussion. "Either their intelligence networks are far more sophisticated than assessed, or our security has been fundamentally compromised." The harmonic patterns of the collective shifted as thousands of Zephyrian minds considered the implications. The possibility that human intelligence had penetrated their systems deeply enough to feed false information for months was almost as disturbing as the possibility that human military capabilities were genuine. What outcome served the collective's interests? Prime Singer Athis resonated. The answer emerged from the collective consciousness like a mathematical proof revealing its solution. Continued warfare carried risks that could not be quantified with acceptable precision. Negotiated peace offered certainty, stability, and the preservation of Zephyrian interests without the gamble of testing human capabilities. In the energy matrices of the ethereal collective, Voice of the Wind's consciousness interfaced with the vast distributed intelligence that guided her species' decisions. The ethereals existed as patterns of organized energy, their thoughts moving at light speed through quantum-entangled networks that spanned their entire civilization. The human problem resonated through their collective awareness like a wave interference pattern, creating nodes of certainty and uncertainty that defied resolution. The ethereals' greatest strength was their ability to process vast amounts of information simultaneously, but the human situation presented information that was inherently ambiguous, uncertain, and possibly false. Prime Voice Aethon's energy pattern merged with the collective discussion, bringing the weight of millennia of experience to bear on the current crisis. The humans have created a situation where all our information processing advantages are neutralized by fundamental